interesting. If we're putting our money towards our own asset, then we're not just throwing money away on rent.
But we're not going to find a place as good as this just close to where I work.
I mean, yeah, we can move to North Ridge. I mean, we can get a lot for our money there.
We can afford to live here right now. Look at us, living and affording.
You know, in order to start a family, you need to start, being more responsible with your money.
You want to have a kid?
Well, eventually. S'mores.
Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump. Today we're going to be recreating the Superman's heat vision effect from the Man of Steel film. When you're trying to recreate something that already exists, it's really good to review the reference material. Let's take a look at a clip from Man of Steel. Alright, so let's kind of frame by frame this a little bit. Here, as the effect begins, we see that there's a glowing behind the eyes, giving you the impression that all the heat is generated from inside the head. We have the pupils glowing, and then the effect itself. Now, it's a very fast-moving beam, but you can see here little variances to the thickness and the diameter. Basically, the way this is moving tells me that this is a fluid effect, and that's exactly how we're going to approach it. Now, if you want to do an AE-only version, Ryan Conley over at FilmRight did a great tutorial on how to do a Superman heat effect with just After Effects, so jump over there if you only want to use After Effects to recreate this. We're going to try to do it like they did in the film, and to start, let's take a look at the footage we've got. Alright, so Eric focuses his eyes on Amber. We have the part where the beam should be coming out, and Amber reacts, and what we'll do is we'll have her head burst into flame. So the first thing I need to do is create a couple of nulls, and I'm going to call this the head tracker, and then I'm going to create a second one. I'm going to call this the eye tracker. And let's start with the eye tracker, which will track Eric's eyes here. And I'm just going to come over, double click on my footage, and bring up my tracking window. I'm going to track motion, and scale up my tracker, and just position it here at the corner of his eye. That way, even when his eye starts to open towards the end, we should still get a reliable track. And let's go ahead and play this through. And here as Eric starts to come back, that should be good. That should be plenty of information for us. So the effect will be long gone by then. So we'll apply the track, and then let's move that to the bottom. And we're going to track Amber's head. Now, I think for this one, what we'll do, let's create a new tracker. And let's try to track right here around the bridge of her nose, right where the eyebrow meets up. Let's go ahead and go forward and see how well that holds. Alright, we lost it a little bit there. So let's back up to where we jumped off. Around here. And let's frame by frame it a little bit. Adjust our track. Keep going frame by frame. Now you could do this with something like Synthesize or PF track. Do an object track, but in the sake of keeping this somewhat simple, that's where it really jumps off, we're just going to do an AE track and then do a little bit of compensation inside of Maya. And we'll apply that. All right, so we've got our 2 tracks. Now what we're going to do is same as in the Dead Space tutorial. We're going to create a camera, just a regular 50 mil. And then we're going to select our camera and our 2 tracks, and we're going to come down to our scripts and use the AE 3D export. I'm going to export from Maya. Name looks good. All right. So let's save that. And the final thing we're going to need to do is export our backing plane. And so we'll just give that a quick render as a PNG sequence. We'll make sure that we change from an underscore to a dot. And we'll come down to our projects. And we'll go to our source images. And we'll call this Heat Vision Background Tutorial. Save that there and render this out. All right, so while that renders, I'm gonna go do something fun, and I will see you when we get to Maya. Oh no, 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 no. All right, so we're back here in Maya, and what we need to do is import the Maya file that After Effects exported for us. So it's sitting here on the desktop, and I'm just gonna open up Maya, and then I'm gonna immediately save this to my scenes, and we'll call this Heat Vision Tutorial. And so we can see, whoa. We can see here that we've got our camera and 2 nulls. Open up my outliner. And I think the first thing we want to do is take a look at our scene scale. Now, before, when we did the Dead Space tutorial, the scene scale wasn't very important, but here it's critical. Fluids and dynamics, particles, all these things like real-world scale. They were all made to work at that real-world scale. You can use them at larger or smaller, but they work at their best when they're at a real-world scale. So let's go ahead and take a look at our settings. So we're going to go to our preferences, and we're going to come down to our settings, and we're going to see we're in meters, and that is really, really big. If I go ahead and create a FumeFX volume, you're going to see it's really, really tiny. We'd have to scale our scene way down to fit within it. Well, what we should do instead is come back, go to our preferences settings, set this to centimeters, and now when we create our grid, it's going to be the proper size. And what we'll want to do is grab our 3 objects, the camera and the 2 trackers. We're going to want to group them and call this the scale. And what I'll do is just bring it down until everything starts fitting nicely inside here. And then I can come in and see. Now our scene scale is starting to be correct, but we've lost sight of our 2 nulls. So let's just go here, we'll break their connection, and we'll just scale them up by 10 or so, There we go, until we can see them a little easier. Let's go ahead and make them 20 by 20 by 20. That should be pretty good. Now what we want to do is grab our scaler here and just move it until we feel pretty confident that the fluid is going to fit nicely within there. So we've got Eric's pulls back to there. Let's make that there. And we're going to have a head here. We're going to want to see some interaction. So we're definitely going to need our fluid container to be a bit larger. So I'm just going to come into the width, go 150. I think that is going to be pretty good. And I think let's just give it a little more depth, 125, I'm sorry, a little more length. Let's go 150 on that as well. That way we're pretty sure that our fluid will have enough room to move around. Okay, so let's go ahead and come down to our camera. Come down to our camera, we'll go to the environment, we'll create an image plane, and then we'll open up our background, click on the Use Image Sequence box, and there we go. Now we can see we've got those trackers, they're looking really nice. Everything's working pretty well. So since the first thing we're going to do is the heat blast from Eric's eyes, let's go ahead and change this frame range down to about 120. And we'll do the same here in Fume so that it doesn't calculate any more than we need. And we may even have to calculate less than that. We'll see just as soon as we kind of get animating. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is create a piece of geometry to stand in for Amber's head. And to do that, I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to create a cube. Oh. There we go. And I'm going to come into its settings. And let's go ahead and give it 2, 3 subdivisions there. 3 and 3. Let's go 3 all around. Okay. Now let's go ahead and get a little closer on it so we can start manipulating it a bit. And we don't need to do any fancy modeling here. We just need something that's going to roughly approximate Amber's head. So So let's go ahead and take Amber's head and put it underneath the head tracker. Then we're going to probably need to do a little bit of counter animation. So we're going to key the translation and rotation. I'll turn on my auto key. And then we're just going to slowly follow. And right about there, set another key. And here's where her head starts to move out a little bit. And that's pretty good. We start to lose a little bit of the rotation, so let's key there. And somewhere around here. a little more tilted over. Let's go ahead and move back just a little bit. There we go. And here we go for a big tilt. Let's key there. And really tilt it. Tilt it up, over, take it down a little bit, and back a bit more. There we go. Let's go ahead and move forward just a bit. So your head's going to eventually rotate back out of that position, so we'll go ahead, key selected, and this is where if you do an object track in another tracking program, you're going to save yourself some time. But since there's only so much time for this one tutorial, I didn't want to bring in another program, we're just going to muscle through this a little bit. Should be coming into position very soon here, where her head's not going to be moving a lot more. There we go. Just a little bit more here, a couple more keys, and I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. There we go. All right. Looks like we lost a little bit of height here. So let's go ahead and just knock this guy back into position a little bit. There we go. All right. So we lose our tracking about the frame 310, so let's just go ahead and make that our end frame for now. Or actually, let's go back to 120. So we have our head correctly in, so the next thing we need to do is add an emitter for the eyeball. And I'm just going to drop it underneath the eye tracker. I'm going to go ahead and zero it out. Then I'm just going to push it forward just a touch, just so it lines up nicely with Eric's eyeball. There we go. And let's just go ahead and move forward. And we can see we're already getting particles emitted, but they're not really particles that we can use just yet. So the reason we're going to use an emitter here is the fluids themselves don't want to move that fast. So when you want something really nice and fast moving, it's really much better to use a particle system to generate the fluid itself. And so in this case, we're going to use a directional emitter. Let's go ahead and give ourselves some more particles to work with. And the direction we want is -x. We want to go in this way, the opposite direction. And let's go ahead and give ourselves just a little bit of spread. I just want it to flare out a little bit. Not too much. I don't want it to be crazy wide at the end, but I don't want it to stay a thin beam either. So for the speed, let's go ahead and try 150. We're probably going to go higher than that, but let's just see what we've got. Yeah, let's definitely go faster than that. Let's try 300. That's looking more like the speed we want, but our particles are coming down and hitting Amber more in the mouth. So let's go ahead and try increasing the direction in the y-axis just a little bit. There we go. That's looking about the right place. Definitely want to add some more particles. I'm going to go ahead and double that amount. There we go. Nice thick spray of particles. Somewhere about right here. Let's say frame 64. Let's set a key. And then at frame 65, let's go ahead and turn our particles off. There we go. Let's turn off our auto keyer while we're at it. The next thing we want to look at is the particle lifespan. So you can see here, they're just blowing straight through and going on forever. And what we're going to want to do is click on our particles, come in here, and in the lifespan, we're going to go to a random range. And let's try something pretty short, like maybe 1/3 of a second, with maybe 1/3 of a second of randomization. That's not bad. Let's go just a little bit under that. Let's go down to 1/4 of a second and 1/4 of a second. There we go. That's more of what I'm looking for. But the particles are still just blowing straight through Amber's head right now. And that's not what I'm interested in. What I want to do is, with my particles selected, I'm going to grab my geometry. I'm going to come up to particles and I'm going to say make collide. And then I'm going to go ahead and see what happens, because what I think is going to happen is going to be pretty funny. Yep, there we go. Particles just bouncing straight off as if her head was made of diamond. And that's not what we want at all. So let's go ahead, come to the geo connector for the head, and let's turn that resilience way down. And let's try turning up a bit of friction, maybe 0.3. And we'll see what that gets us, because what we want is more of a, let's try less friction. Want it more to wrap around her head rather than stop immediately on it, which that's given us a little more of that. All right, so they're wrapping pretty well. Maybe I want to come in and turn down a little more of that friction and maybe a little more of the resilience. There we go, they're wrapping a little more now. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Particle interaction's looking really good. I'm gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll start with Fume and we'll start getting this effect moving. Soda. So the next thing we're going to do is start getting the fluids to work. So we're going to come over to our particle, and then in our FumeFX menu, we're going to come here and we're going to click Create Particle Source. And with that particle highlighted, you can see it's already in here. If we wanted to, we could detach that, and we could always come and attach. There we go. All right. So now they are attached to an emitter, but still nothing's happening. And that is because, one, we need to come into FumeFX, click on our options to get the relationship manager. And we want to click on the particle source, make sure that it's active inside of Fume. Now, if we come down and hit play, we're still not going to get anything. And that's because we haven't simulated yet. And that's this nice green button here. But before we simulate, let's go ahead and look over our settings. I know the spacing is way too big, so I'm going to half it immediately. We already took care of our output frames and our playback, so I'm fine with that. I'm going to come down to my maximum iterations, and I'm just going to go to 80. If we start seeing that maybe it's not giving us the look we want, we can always come back and bring this up. This is kind of a quality setting that's a little bit variable. Our time scale, since we're dealing with fire, and again, fast moving fire, let's just jump it up a little bit to 1.25. Let's see. In turbulence, well, we're going to have to tune this value later, but I'm going to start with a low number. I'm going to start with a fairly small scaled turbulence with a lot of detail. And I'm going to change the animation frame rate from 10 frames to 12. So every half second we have it switching around. I don't need any blocking sides. Come down to the fuel, and I'm going to give it a lot less expansion. I don't want it to flare out like an explosion at all. And I'm going to go ahead and make it a bit hotter than normal. And I'm going to turn up the burn rate so that it burns off faster. And I'll turn down the ignition temperature as well, just to make sure that everything burns all at once. Over to my smoke, I'm going to turn off simulate smoke. And in fact, I'm going to come into my particle source, and I'm going to come down to the smoke, and I'm just going to disable it. We don't even want to spend the time computing it. Let's see, in our buoyancy, again, this is fast moving, directional. We don't want a lot of upward draft. So let's go ahead and go 0.1 on our temperature. Wavelet turbulence, let's go ahead and we will go ahead and calculate for wavelet turbulence, but I'm not convinced we're going to need it for this, but it's always good to calculate for it just in case you do need it. Let's see, post-processing is fine. Let's come down to our render settings, and again, we're going to just turn off smoke. But we do want to come down here and change our colors. So that was a nice, bright white to red kind of a fire. So let's go ahead and do that. And we may come back and play with these a bit more in a bit. But I'm going to save. I'm going to open up my preview window, turn up the quality, and let's go ahead and see what our first simulation is like. Well, we're not seeing anything here in our window, and we're also getting a very slow update, which is because we have our viewport update set to every 10 frames. I want it every frame. Other than that, this is not bad. I'm seeing a lot of things I like here. Let's go ahead and let it play for a minute. All right, so that's the first thing that we need to fix, is we have our particles interacting with the geometry, but not the fluid itself. So let's come back, click these two together, and we're going to create a collision object. All right, let's go ahead and make that icon smaller. I don't really need any of these guys to be as big as they are, just distracting. All right. Let's come back. Let's turn on always display. And then let's see if we can get that simulation working a little better. There we go. Now we're getting some appearance of it in our window. Go ahead and stop. Like I said, there's a lot of good here, but we got some more work to do. I'm going to come down to my render settings, and I'm going to change the thickness. I don't like how far it's dropping off in the thinness of it. So I'm going to come and create more of a mountain shape. I want more of that white in there. Like I said, there's a nice white core to this. Then I'm going to come over to my opacity, maybe turn that up a bit. That's looking pretty good. Now let me come back, and I think I'm going to add in just a little bit more turbulence. I just want to see a little more variation here. And I think maybe on my fuel, let's go ahead and turn that burn rate up a little higher too. I don't want such a heavy collection. And let's take another preview. And this is looking pretty good. It's a little low resolution right now, but I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing here. The big question is it moving fast enough? So let's go ahead, let it calculate a couple more frames. And then I'm going to go ahead, hit stop. And then I'm going to do a preview. And I'm just going to go make preview. And I'm just going to go first, second. That's all I really want to see. And I'll take this, drop it on the desktop, and call it test 01. Because a lot of this blockiness will solve itself as soon as we up the resolution. So the big question is it going to move fast enough? Because remember, our fluid in that reference was moving really fast. That's looking like a pretty good speed to me. I think we're definitely getting the kind of speed we want, and it's got some great interaction happening here. All right, let's go ahead, turn off our preview. We'll come up to our resolution, and let's go ahead and double that, save the file, and let's take another preview. All right, at this point, I'm going to stop it, not because I don't like anything. I'm actually really liking the way this is looking a lot. What I want to do is come in, bring up my render settings, and I'm just going to take a preview render because I think this is looking pretty close to final. And I just want to take a look at it really quick. All right. And what I'm going to do is turn off my particles. I'm going to hide them so Mental Ray won't render them. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to really quickly add a new Lambert. And in its matte opacity, I'm going to turn it into a black hole. Then with the geo selected, I'll right click and assign the material to the selection. So that way we will have a non-rendering geometric object in our... And let's take a look. All right, not bad at all. I think we've definitely got a bit too much in the brightness. So let's come down to our render settings in Fume, and let's just turn that opacity way back down. And at this point, I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn off my image plane so I don't render it. And let's take another look. That's looking pretty good. Once we add a glow, all this area here is just going to flare right out. So I think we've definitely got something we can work with. We're getting those nice variances in the thickness. We're getting some great licks of flame off of it. I think this is a pretty good match for what we saw in our example. So let's go ahead and render this guy out. And I'll just come in, I'm gonna render out at 1920 by 1080. Or actually, let's go ahead and finish the simulation. And we'll see if it can pick up where it left off. No, it can't. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and simulate this guy out, and then I will render it, and then we'll come back here in a little bit, and we'll deal with the head on fire. So I will see you in just a bit. All right, so we're back, and I want to just review my render settings before we move on to the second part here. And what I did is just rendered out a 1920 1080. I had my renderable camera set to the camera from After Effects. I had my frame range from 0 to 120. I had it set as an animation sequence. And for the file name, I used a %s/%s. So it'll create a folder and a file sequence based on the project name. So let's go ahead and talk about the head fire. And so let's go ahead and save. Here we'll go head fire tutorial. And we're going to go ahead and clear out some of these things from Fume. We're not going to need our particles anymore. And there we go. So since we're just dealing with this object here now, what I want to do is actually come in here and I'm going to grab my scale and I'm going to increase it a little bit because I want to be able to have the Fume fire given a little more to work with. So that way it just has a nicer, bigger look and a more realistic. Oh, almost overwrote something here. Whenever you're doing something like this, make sure you come back to your FumeFX. If you're going to continue on using the same scene to make another simulation, come down to your FumeFX, open it up, and make a new file. Make a new folder and file. So here we'll call headfire tutorial and headfire tutorial. That way you don't overwrite any simulation you've already done. So we know we're going to want this one to last a little longer, but I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to want to start it. Let's go ahead and make sure Amber's head is in good shape. There we go. Looks like it'll fit in there just fine. So I'm going to come back here. That's where the head snap starts. So that's where I'm going to start 10 frames in. And I'll come 10 frames in to 315. There we go. Let's go ahead and just change some of the render settings right away. And I'm just going to come back, and instead of that bright red, we're going to come back and go do an orange. And we'll just go yellow to orange for now. And we'll probably come in and fix this later. Let's go ahead and drop this back a little bit more like it was. Let's go ahead and turn our smoke back on. Go ahead and simulate smoke. Let's go ahead and return some of these values to their defaults. The temperature will turn back up. We'll keep the ignition temperature low. Let's try a burn rate of maybe 10. We don't want this to burn quite as fast. The heat production, like, we can turn that back to 10 where it was. We're going to turn on fire create smoke because for the head we want a nice little bit of smoke coming off of it. And let's try a density of maybe 5. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our head, grab our head, and click on the create object source. We're going to use that head to create our source. And then we want to come into Fume again, make sure it's connected. And let's go ahead and scale that guy down. I don't know why they make these icons so big. And let's just go ahead and see what happens here. Oh. Stop that. See, we've already got something happening, but we're still at our higher resolution. So let's go ahead down to 0.5 just so we can see things a bit faster. That's starting to look pretty good already. But it's a little too even all over for me. So what I want to do is come down to my source, and in the fuel, I'm going to go to intensity for the map source, and then I'm going to click on the little button, and I'm going to create a noise. And in my noise, I just want to make sure it has a good amount of variance in it from black to white. I don't want it to be too much all over the place. And lower its frequency a little bit. There we go. So now if I come back, I've got that in there, and that should help break up a lot of what we're seeing. Let's go ahead and go to 6 for the sake of this not being the longest tutorial in the history of mankind. And here we go, straight out. We're already getting some beautiful flame licks here. So really nice look happening. Now, I think I've got too much smoke. So I want to come down, and I'm going to change that down to maybe 2. Try 2. And I'm also going to turn my burn rate down a little bit. I'd like those flames to last just a little bit longer. And since we're having such a nice look already, I'm going to go ahead and turn my spacing down a bit more, just for the sake of moving quickly here. And I think I can definitely turn that burn rate down a little more still. Maybe get a little more height out of my flames. But overall, that's looking pretty good. That's one of the nice things about Fume, is it does get you to a basic fire very, very quickly. Let's go ahead and try the 25. And let's go ahead and turn on our preview window here. We'll start to see what we've got. Go ahead and stop it there. I'm going to come into my render settings, and I'm just going to add a little more color here. Just a little bit more of a breakup in the ramp, just to make it a little more exciting. And at the end, we'll have it be more of a red color. There we go. That's starting to look a little nicer. Let's go ahead and we'll turn this back down to 960 by 540 so we can take a preview render. Okay, not bad, but we're still a little small on the flame. So let's go ahead, and this is a little too bright, so let's make that more of a reddish orange. Just a little something there at the end. And let's come up to our fuel. Got lost for a second there. And let's try 40. And we'll try another render. Oops. Oh my goodness. I got completely turned around. I've been taking this the wrong way. It's getting shorter and shorter each time. Let's try 2.5. I've been accidentally increasing it and wondering why those flames weren't getting to where I wanted them. There we go. Sometimes you just don't remember every setting. There we go. Now we're starting to see what I should have been seeing a long time ago, and I'm sure that somebody out there was screaming at their screen that I was doing that wrong. And okay, I've gone a little too far the other way with it now. Let's go maybe 3.5. And let's go ahead and bring our spacing back a bit. So now we're starting to get closer to that final look that we want. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. So let's go ahead and let's take a render It's looking pretty nice. We'll go ahead and we're going to want to increase our spacing a little more, or decrease it a little more, so that we get a little more resolution. But what I want to do before we do that is come down to the illumination tab, and I'm going to turn on my multiple scattering. And this is another one where I get confused about which direction I need to go. So let me bring up my preview and see, do I go lower or higher for more scattering? I don't know why that preview is not giving me something reliable on this one. So let's go ahead and that's a good amount of scattering in there, but our smoke color is very bright. I want it to be a darker, more black, gray to black kind of thing. Take another preview. Okay, so let's go ahead. And this is a good thing to remember. When you don't remember exactly which way you need to go with the setting, just push it really far one way, see what happens, push it far the other way, and then you'll start to remember, oh yeah, that should be the right direction. There we go. Now we're starting to see something. Yeah, we definitely want to keep that lower. All right, so there we go. Having some nice interaction with the smoke, giving it a little color and illumination. So let's go ahead and let's bring this guy down to something closer to a render setting, and let's do a simulation and see where we end up. All right, that's looking pretty good. I can see a lot of nice detail in here. That's going to look excellent when it's finished. All right, so I'm going to let this finish its simulation, and then I'm going to render out the results, and then we'll meet back up in After Effects and we'll put this whole thing together. See you in a bit.
Oh, Reddit.
All right, so here we are in After Effects. I've got my two renders, and let's go ahead and just take a look at how these two things ended up looking without any effects added onto them. And I think we can see that the idea is here, but it's looking pretty darn fake right now. So let's go ahead and start adding some finishing to this. And what I'm going to do is start with my heat vision. And to get that moving a little better, I'm going to come down here and add a motion blur to it. Hopefully smooth that out just a bit. Maybe go 15 on the samples. And then I'm going to come in and add a glow. And for this glow, I'm going to want to use that pale color in the reddish area to maybe a more saturated red. And I'm going to bring my threshold until I start seeing it. There we go. That's starting to look a bit better. Pick up its intensity just a bit. And let's see how that looks. That's already looking a lot better, a lot more like what we're looking for. And we see that with that head geometry set to the black hole, we're definitely getting a nice cutout that really gives us the impression that this flame is wrapping around Amber's face. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and create a new solid, and we'll call this the optical flare layer. And I'm just going to drop it on there. I'm going to add it, and I'm going to come into the options, and I'm going to clear out everything. I'm going to add a glow, and I'm going to add a streak, and I'm going to let that streak be a bit shorter. And I'm going to place it right over here with Eric's eye, and then scale it down until I feel it's about the right size. I just want to add a bit of extra light here. There we go. And then I'm going to attach this layer to the eye tracker, so that way they'll move together. There we go. That's looking really nice. And the last bit that I want to add is, if you remember in the reference, there was a bit of glow from inside the skull. And what we're going to do is come over here, add a black solid, and call this head glow. And I'm going to add a fractal noise. And I'm going to change it over to a terrain. And I'm going to kind of push these two values around until I can start seeing more of the veiny nature of it. There we go. I want that kind of veininess underneath. And then for just a moment here, let's go ahead and add this on top so that I can come down and scale it. Get it to about the size I want. And I can position here so we start getting these nice little glowing veins underneath. So let's go ahead, turn that back to normal, and finish this out. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is tinting. And this tint, I'm going to take the black and turn it to kind of a dark red. And then the final thing I want to do is add a glow. But I'm not sure what my glow settings are going to be just yet, because I need to come in and I'm going to add a mask just in this area. Now I can turn it back on. I can feather that mask out just a bit. Let's go ahead and put it underneath the flare and underneath actually the heat vision effect, and we can already see it's starting to look pretty good. But let's go ahead and turn on our glow. Let's set our parameters up. And there we go. Now if we screen this, there we go. We're starting to get that nice underneath feeling. Let's go ahead and turn it down so it's not quite so intense. Let's turn down the glow on it itself. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And this layer we're also going to want to attach to the eye tracker. Then what we'll finally do is, when Eric starts leaning back and the flames end, right here, we'll go ahead, take the opacity of both of these guys, and turn it off. Then we'll go ahead and end those layers, make sure they're completely gone. Let's see how that's looking. All right, I'm very, very happy with how that's looking. So let's go ahead and get Amber's firehead started. Now let's go ahead and turn off our top layer here. And we need to bring this on in a little more of an interesting way. And I also don't like that it wraps completely around her head. So I'm going to create a mat. And I'm just going to make it big enough that it'll encompass the head fire and the smoke pretty well. Something like that, maybe. I'm going to attach this mat to the head tracker, and I'm going to feather it a bit. I'm going to come down and I'm going to do an alpha mat. That's going to get me a little more of what I'm looking for there. It already looks a lot nicer. And then I'm going to go ahead and animate this on. So right around 2, 3, 4, 5 frames in, I'm going to take this mask, lock its position, and then I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to bring it down and over so the flame will come across her head. There we go. That's good. All right. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and let's screen this guy. And let's go ahead and make a duplicate here that will keep on normal because we don't want to lose that smoke. But we do want to give it a little more intensity. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to add my glow. And don't worry about the color it is right now. All will be well. There we go. Give it a little more radius. Less intensity maybe. And I think we're just a little too saturated here. So I'm going to come into my yellows and just pull those back a bit. Let them. There we go. Maybe in the reds as well. Just a little bit more. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and add some motion blur to both of these. And remember, we want to put that ahead in the chain. There we go. And that's already looking really, really good. Maybe just a little too intense still. So let's add that same color correction here. And I'm just going to reset it and come down to my yellows. Just get those in line. Master. There we go. Just desaturate it just a touch. Now we're looking like we got some fire. All right, so what else can we do to this? Well, Amber's head's on fire, but we're not seeing the effect of it at all. And I think what would be fun is to come in and add some charring. And what we'll do is drop this guy below all of the glow layers. We're going to come in and just really roughly mask out a shape that we'll correct in a second here. Bring it in. Up. And let's go ahead and feather it a little bit. And we're going to add that same fractal noise to this guy. And this one we can pretty much leave the settings alone, except I want it to be a little more contrasty, and I want the scale to be a bit less. There we go. Now if I come in and I multiply it, we see we have what looks like a very horrible thing happening to Amber's head. So let's go ahead and attach that to the head tracker. And let's take a preview here. See where we want this to start coming on. Probably about right here. Let's go ahead and just move that over a little bit. We'll turn off its opacity here and see how that works. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and we can finally turn back on our heat vision. See how these are all working together. It's not bad. I think that mask is revealing just a little faster than I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and move over these keyframes a bit. Still a little too fast. 10 more frames. There we go. I think that's going to be a bit closer to what I want. There it is. All right. So I think the last thing that we can really do here that would be a bit fun is let's add some embers to the top of her head. And for that, I'm just going to bring in one of the Destruction Pack Ember files. And what I'll do is find where those embers are. Let's go ahead and screen them. Let's bring down their size a bit. And let's add them to the top here. Be seen a little easier. And what I'm going to want to do is just have them come out let them roll off. Then I'm going to split my layer. I'm going to hold down Control Shift and D, and then I'm going to see where these next ones need to be when they come out. Move my layer over a little bit. Solo that guy. That's where they end, so I'm going to split it again. See where Amber's head is at. Line up my embers. Looking pretty good. And I'm going to see where those run out. I'm going to split it one more time. Oops. Have the final embers right there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I seem to have cut off the very top here with my mat, so I'm going to come in and just add a little motion tile to that mat. Just brings it right back in. There we go. There we go. I think we've got a pretty good looking effect here. Let's go ahead and preview a little bit, see how it all comes together. All right, I think that's looking great. I'm very happy with this, and I think you could always tweak it a little more, maybe a little more color correction, but I think anything else you do is a matter of taste and up to you. Thanks so much for watching the tutorial. I hope you've learned something that you can use in your work. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Go and create.